All right, good morning. It's Friday morning, February 17th. And we are here this morning on BHCC Day, Vermont Housing Conservation Coalition Day. We have a handful of witnesses, kind of a throwback to the beginning of the year when we had a lot of folks coming in just to provide us with some information, as we heard today. Today's marking the 35th anniversary of VHCB. But we have with us Molly Dugan, who is the co-chair of the Housing Conservation Coalition. And she works at Cathedral Square. Mary Cohen is here from the Housing Trust of Rutland County. Benjamin Doyle is here from Preservation Trust. And Mohammed Abdullahi. Did I get that close?
What?
Okay, thank you. From Trusted Community Voices, and Matt Williams from the Catamount Trail Association. So let us have, now several of us are missing, which is good. I just want to mark that our room capacity, we're still in COVID room capacity thing, we're over it. But if it gets hot and stuffy in here, which is usually from us talking, not from our witnesses, then we may just ask a couple people to step out and rotate in and out. So, Molly, please join us. And those of us who are here will quickly go around the table. Representative Tom Stevens from Waterbury.
Joe Parsons, I represent Thompson, Groton, and Newbury.
Ashley Bartley, Fairfax and Hershey.
Caleb Elder, Addison 4 District.
Dennis LeBounty, Caledonia 3.
Larry Labor, Essex, Orleans, District 1.
Mary Howard, Rutland District 6.
All right, and so welcome.
Well, good morning. As the chair said, my name is Molly Dugan, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Coalition. And as he also mentioned, I work for Cathedral Square. And Cathedral Square is a housing and services nonprofit that provides affordable housing for over 1,200 Vermonters in primarily Northwest Vermont. Thank you so much, Chair Stevens, for your long-term commitment to an advocacy for conservation and housing issues. And thank you for all the committee members for having us this morning as part of our legislative day. The Vermont Housing and Conservation Coalition is a group of about 50 organizations, large and small, not-for-profit organizations and businesses working in your communities and throughout the state on the dual goals of providing affordable housing and conserving and restoring land, water, and recreational resources, and strengthening our climate resiliency. You will hear from members of VHCC representing both in just a minute. The coalition is asking the General Assembly to support full statutory funding via the property transfer tax for Vermont Housing and Conservation Board for fiscal year 24. We believe it's time to reset and fund VHCB as was originally intended, with roughly half the property transfer tax revenue source. Last year, the legislature increased our base funding by $10 million. The governor's proposed 24 budget is $9.6 million less that the legislature approved for base funding last year, and it's $12.6 million less than the anticipated statutory share. This is not the right direction. Given the robust revenue the PTT has been bringing in due to the current real estate market, we feel this is the moment to take this action. Our members have a proven track record, which you're going to hear about in just a minute, and have a pipeline of projects ready to go that will have immediate and long-term effects on housing, conservation, and economic vitality. I'm excited to turn things over to our panelists who will tell their stories and describe projects that rely on VHCB funding. As you hear from each speaker, listen for the common themes: the value placed on partnerships, how the projects funded respect the unique community culture and history of place, a focus on long-term enduring impacts for generations, and a priority for serving people traditionally marginalized by seeking equitable access to housing, open land, health services, food, and jobs. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. Mary. Oh. I will not take you out.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm just gonna try to do technology, which is always scary. I'm ready now. Thank you. Um,
Nervous this morning?
It says only one participant. Great.
It's a great view. There you are.
Amazing. Yeah, there we go. Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Mary Cohen, and I am the Executive Director of the Housing Trust of Rutland County. And today I want to share with you one particular project that VHCP has had an incredible impact on. But before I do that, I want to tell you, we have a portfolio of about 400 affordable units in Rutland County. Every single one of them has been a VHCB project. It has had a huge impact in our community, and it continues to be. I want to tell you about Lincoln Place. Lincoln Place is the old Immaculate Heart of Mary School. It was a repurposed building. I show you this picture because, as you can see, there's a little mat next to the stairs. What you probably can't see is that there's also a water bottle and there's a retainer case. When this project was being thought about, and there was a lot of discussion around homelessness in Rutland County, and this project was coming to fruition, this building was toured, and our executive director at the time said, we've got to get this person inside. It's an important thing. This is what Lincoln Place looks like today. The building is completely energy efficient. It has 19 units in it, 12 micro units and 7 one-bedroom units. We have designated 10 of those to those experiencing homelessness on an ongoing basis. This is what the inside of an apartment looks like. This is a micro unit. And when we were thinking about the design of this building, we talked a lot about barriers to tenancy for those experiencing homelessness. And what we did was consider a lot of built-ins, because if you're experiencing homelessness, you don't come with a lot of furniture. So we have built-in shelves, a lot of shelving, the tables. We tried to pay attention to that. This is an outdoor community space. In projects in the past, we probably call it a smoking shelter, but we like to call it an outdoor community space. It's respectful. Those are granite blocks right there. It's fairly close to the building, so that we wanted to make sure that they used it as opposed to smoking indoors, which is unfortunately what a lot of. We also built a lot of community space inside. This is, you can see the remnants of the school. It is the old gym that's still there. There's this little stage that we have set up as a little cafe, but those can all be removed and, performance can take place. This is also a space where there's many community meals that the residents get together and have meals. I want to tell you a little bit about our residents, and I want you to meet Anne. Anne was living in a hotel when she came to Lincoln Place, and her story is really about loss. She lost her husband. They both had disability income, but when her husband passed away, she no longer had, 2 incomes, and she no longer could afford her apartment. So she got evicted from one, tried another one, and unfortunately was unable to sustain any kind of rental because her income did not support it. So when we met Anne, she was living in a hotel. And I do want to say that this project came online in November of 21. So the timing was really it was well timed. So now Anne lives at Lincoln Place. She is the master of creating community and organizing the dinners that happen at Lincoln Place. I'd also like you to meet Mike. Mike also came from the hotel system. At one time in Mike's life, he had a job, he could afford an apartment, but unfortunately Mike has alcoholism and that has affected his ability to work. Mike found himself, his disease made him lose his job, and he found himself in hotels. And what he did was he tried to go around the state and find different communities, always thinking that he was going to start again in a new community. When we met Mike, he was in a hotel in Rutland, and the biggest impact for him when he moved in was, now I can be warm. He was a lot about being cold and out. And this is Jeremy. Jeremy's story is a little bit different. Jeremy works in retail. His income was he never had enough income to be able to support himself. And so he lived on his mother's couch. And when things weren't going so well on his mother's couch, which, sometimes those relationships can happen, he would move to his grandmother's couch. When he wasn't at his grandmother's couch, sometimes he chose different friends that he would couch surf on. So Jeremy has now moved into Lincoln Place, still works, his housing is subsidized, and he is doing really well and finally has the independence that he's always wanted. Ooh, sorry, how do I go back? There we go. This is some artwork that's in Lincoln Place, and I just wanted to share that with you. This is a mural that's in one of the hallways, and this is Hestia, the goddess of hearth and home. And we just wanted to share that with you because we want to make sure that, people of all incomes and all abilities deserve fun, welcoming, and great places to live. And this is just what, again, Lincoln Place looks like now. And VHCB has been an instrumental part in this project. They were the cheerleaders to start. This project has many partners. Not only does the Housing Trust own and manage this property, but Rutland Mental Health is there 20 hours a week. We work with the Homeless Prevention Center for our referrals, because as I said, we have 10 of the 19 designated to those experiencing homelessness. When we opened this project in November of 21, 14 people came out of the hotels in Rutland. 2 were at risk of being homeless. 1 was fleeing domestic violence, and the other 2 were successfully housed but wanted a new and respectful place to live. So this has been an impactful project for Rutland County, for Rutland City, and we truly appreciate VHCB's participation. They're cheering us on, the collaboration that has happened with the organizations within Rutland County.
Representative Bartlett.
If I could just ask, and it's definitely my own ignorance, what is a micro unit? Like, what constitutes a micro unit? Because I've never heard that before.
It's like a studio.
Okay.
It doesn't have a separate bedroom.
Okay.
It has an area.
Thank you.
Representative Labonte.
Are there any family members living in this?
This is just for single people.
Just for single
primarily. There are some couples, but the 1 bedroom can certainly house a couple, but it's not for a family.
I really love that you kept basketball court.
Yeah, it's
I
not
think it
big.
really gives it, a lot of nostalgia, from the building side. And, but no, I think it's, do people use it at all?
They do.
Oh, great.
As a matter of fact, when we opened, we also supplied a foosball table, and some other things that can be used in this space. And yes, it is used. And it's not only for the residents, it's also for the community. We had the Rutland City Police did their award ceremony in this building, which was really great.
No, it's beautiful. I wouldn't mind living there myself.
I know.
Representative Howard.
Thank you. I have toured this building, and I couldn't be any more proud of the work that was done here and the whole atmosphere of the Lincoln Place is just phenomenal. And I hope to see more similar places in Rutland City. So thank you.
This is actually an important permanent support in place as well. When you put people who experience homelessness together, and as we've seen in the hotels, a lot of times the behavior gets really unruly. We've worked really hard on keeping all our residents stable, and Rutland Mental Health as a partner and being on site has been incredible.
I had the opportunity to watch it through this process, my sister-in-law lives up on Nickel Street, just above the church.
Oh, no kidding.
So I'm also noting, given what's happened here in our building recently, that you're right down the street from Jones Donuts, and more importantly, to a supermarket, other the drugstore, et cetera. So it's centrally located. What is happening on the other side of the church to the rectory that was torn down? Are you involved with that at all?
I am not, except for the church would love for us to buy that building now because they have closed that and they're only going to have services in one of the other Catholic churches. So the plan for that is unknown at the moment. It's a beautiful building. It's really hard to build housing in a church like that.
Yeah, no, but there was a lot, isn't there a lot next to it that they tore down the rectory? Anyway, yeah, so, no, thank you for sharing that. It's so great to see it in the inside. And congratulations on getting it done.
Thank you. Thank you. Good.
Next up is Benjamin Doyle. Ben?
Thanks.
Welcome back.
I'm gonna stop the share, don't worry.
Oh, I think I just did.
Well, good to see you in 3D, Ben.
Yeah, really nice to
Last time
see
you testified for us, you were just a wee little stamp-sized person.
Yes, it's nice to be human again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this time, and thank you for the opportunity to voice my support for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Ben Doyle, and I'm the president of the Preservation Trust of Vermont. The Preservation Trust of Vermont is a nonprofit organization that builds community through the preservation and revitalization of Vermont's historic buildings, villages, and downtowns. We provide a wide range of technical assistance and funding to community groups across the state. Last year, we worked on 250 individual projects in 148 communities across Vermont. I like to think of us as a community's first and longest friend when it comes to saving the places they love. At the Preservation Trust of Vermont, we often say that historic preservation and community and economic development is a team sport. It takes, as Gus Seelig likes to say, a conspiracy of goodwill. From our point of view at PTV, there is no better partner, no better teammate than the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. PTV currently co-holds 59 historic preservation easements with VHCB, covering 83 buildings, 1 structure, and 3 archaeological sites. These easements and our monitoring of them help ensure that some of Vermont's historic assets will be there for future generations. But that's just the start of the ways in which we work together. VHCB gets the big picture. They recognize that it is the connections found in our rural communities that make them work. VHCB partners with us to preserve a sense of place by funding historic preservation projects, and they also ensure that the historic built landscape we preserve provides safe and affordable housing for Vermonters to live in. VHCB conserves the working landscapes that surround our compact villages and downtowns that have defined this state for generations, and with the awareness that we will need to prepare and mitigate for climate change. And VHCB understands that in order to preserve a rural way of life, we need to have an equitable rural economy that works for all Vermonters. Today, I'd like to share just a few examples of VHCB's partnership with VTV that exemplify this balance between preserving what we all love about Vermont, but also adapting to meet a changing future. So I'm just gonna, oh boy. Great. So this is just actually a map of the places that we worked in 2021. So you can see a pretty broad range.
And has everybody shared their, a link to their, please feel free to share this with us or any kind of slide that you have. We would really appreciate it.
Great. So this is a picture of the East Calais General Store. There has been a store in East Calais for almost 175 years. This store, though, actually closed in 2019. And at the Preservation Trust of Vermont, this is kind of our thing. We work a lot with general stores that have closed, and really it's a market failure in a rural community when there's the deferred maintenance on an old historic building like this and then a generational transfer of ownership. It's kind of like a dairy farm. It's sometimes really hard for the next generation to pick it up and run with it because of the deferred maintenance. It doesn't cash flow. The margins are too small. So we've worked to promote a model called community supported enterprises, where a nonprofit organization purchases the real estate, applies for funding, rehabilitates it. They don't want to run a general store. They just want a general store. So they lease it out to a private operator who can run it at a reduced overhead, thereby continuing this really important institution in a rural community, a gathering place for community, a place where you can get your basic staples. And so this is a project. I was there on Wednesday. It's completely under construction right now. We could barely find a place to park because sheetrock was getting delivered and all of that. But this is a project that has really a group called the East Calais Community Trust has stepped in to take on this project and formed the nonprofit and has aggregated a bunch of funding. But none of it would have been possible without the support of VHCB. They provided feasibility funding through the READY program. They provided lead mitigation funding, housing funding, historic preservation funding, all of which will make this store, again, a vibrant community hub, but also importantly, energy efficient, 3 units, affordable units, perpetually affordable units up above. So it's a great combination of combining the retail with the housing in a compact village. And I got to be honest, like that's not happening in the private market. So this, I think, is a really good example. I'll also point out that because of VHCB's investment, which makes this project possible, they were able to leverage Preservation Trust funding, which included a $100,000 grant from the National Park Service for the Paul Brune Revitalization Program. And then also we recently were lucky enough to receive a congressionally directed spending request from Senator Leahy to support community supported enterprises. So that's an additional $196,000 that'll be going to this project. And again, that would not have been possible if VHCB hadn't led the way. This is a rendering of what the store is going to look like. And they're well on their way. They've already secured an operator and hope to be open in the fall. This is a picture of a train station in Danville. I was actually there yesterday. This train station is from 1871. And, you know, obviously the train doesn't go through Danville anymore. Maybe about 30 years ago, they were trying to find a use for this building. They turned it into their local recycling center, and that worked. But it's perhaps not the highest and best use of this really remarkable structure. And as I think probably all of you know, the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail is now opening up and will run from Swanton all the way to St. Johnsbury. It's going to be this incredible driver of the outdoor economic economy, of the recreation economy. And what I really think is fascinating about it, this is an incredible opportunity, a 90-mile trail with something like 16 or 17 historic train stations along the way, some of which are being used, some of which are not, and are really underutilized. And I kind of think of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail as like I-91, you have to have your exits. These are the exits. People can get off at Danville now, and they'll be renovating this train station to serve as a community hub, a welcome center, a gateway to their village green, which is just down the street. So it's a really fantastic project. This is what it looks like right now. Within a year, it will look like that. And then this is the final example that I want to share with you. And this is, you know, I've been in community and economic development a long time. I used to work at USDA Rural Development. This is probably the most complicated project I have ever been involved in. This is the former Vermont Marble Company complex in Proctor, Vermont, which at one time was the largest marble company in the world and employed over 1,000 people in Proctor. Obviously, the nature of the industry changed over time, and about 10, 15 years ago, the final owners of this site decided that they were going to liquidate the assets of the Vermont Marble Museum, which is located in this portion of the building and was really a showroom for the work of the Vermont Marble Company, but also a museum that highlighted the history of this place and of this industry. And it's an incredible asset. The Preservation Trust of Vermont, over a decade ago, when really the collections were at risk of being sold to the wind, stepped in, raised money, and worked with VHCB to actually purchase 200,000 square feet. So this section of the building. And for the past decade, have worked on environmental remediation, maintaining the building. We have a historic preservation easement with VHCB to ensure that this complex and the facade of the complex is preserved and that the museum has an opportunity to succeed. Sometimes things don't go as planned. In this project, originally it was envisioned that the museum would be enough of an economic driver to make this whole complex work. That proved not to be the case for a variety of reasons, the pandemic least among them. So we pivoted and we said, we put out an RFP to the world, said we need a new partner that can help us find an end use for this building that will make it sustainable, will make it vibrant again. And the entire time we did that, we worked with VHCB, who we hold the easement with and who had helped fund the purchase of the building originally. And they got it. They understood that we needed to pivot. They understood that there was opportunity here. And they worked with us every step of the way to try and find a new owner, which we did. This summer, we transferred ownership of the building to Brandon and Travis, who are the CFO and CEO of Zion Growers, which is the first industrial hemp processing company in the Northeast. This is not CBD, this is not marijuana, this is fiber, which is really a historic industry in Vermont. You know, the Fairbanks, they built their scale business to weigh hemp. And so these folks started, they bought a facility in St. Johnsbury, met them there. And I said, boy, if you love industrial properties, if I got the place for you. They came down there, toured the facility. 8 months later, we were able to transfer the building. They need just thousands and thousands of square feet of space to store hemp bales and to process it. And in addition, if I could just back up to this. So we transferred ownership of this entire parcel to them. As part of the negotiation, we were actually able to secure a 100-year lease for 10,000 square feet of space for the museum. So in perpetuity, that will be open to the public. The collections will be accessible. And then in addition to that, they negotiated a purchase of the remainder of the complex, including 24 acres with the previous owner, the Hems, and now control this entire complex and have an end use based on the agricultural economy that's actually forward looking and that something positive is going to happen. I got to tell you, it is a risk. We don't know for sure that it's going to work, but I believe in these people. And I think it's also really important to note that for hundreds of years, we've been taking risks on white entrepreneurs. And these are BIPOC business owners that are investing in the ag economy. They love Vermont. And I really believe that they're going to do something wonderful here. Again, I just want to be really clear. It would not have happened without VHCB making that initial investment, but also working with us as a partner to understand we needed to think big picture. And so with that, I just want to, this is an open house they had at the museum after the transfer of ownership, where we had over 150 people there who came to see and think about what's next for the museum. So in closing, I just want to say, I hope that these examples reassure you that VHCB is a true champion for Vermont's rural communities. What we are really talking about here is preserving the viability of rural communities in a time of profound change. In the coming decade, I believe we will see a migration to Vermont that we haven't seen since the Back to the Land movement of the early 1970s. Whether it's from COVID, climate change, or political choice, people are going to come to Vermont. If our rural communities, and by that I mean Belvedere, not just Burlington, are resilient enough to welcome these new Vermonters, then we will have realized an enormous opportunity. If they aren't, we face the real possibility of losing the landscapes, villages, and communities that we love. For 35 years, VHCB has led this work and delivered. In this moment, we need them more than ever, which is why I urge you to fund the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board at its full statutory share. Thank you for your time.
Ben, I have a question for you. We're about to embark on our share of the housing bill or housing issues that are coming up. And I was so glad to see that you were coming to our committee so I could ask this question. There is a tension between preserving a village character and interpreting that as exclusive to new building, especially in areas where there's infrastructure.
Love it.
How are you, how is the preservation? I mean, because I think as long as Paul was alive and part of the organization, we didn't question what preservation meant. And but since his passing, the world has changed, and the need to build where there's infrastructure, downtowns that have village character. There's just and then there's zoning, and then there's environmental questions as well, but I'm just, how is PTV thinking about that tension these days? Or maybe you don't even call it a tension.
You know, I think I worked with Paul, and I think what's really fascinating is that Paul really was on the forefront of getting it, I think, about what preservation really is about, and that it's community and economic development, and that we're preserving the future. Preservation is the lens through which we approach it. To your question about character, that's a very nebulous term, but I like to think that people choose to save the places that reflect their values, right? So what are our values as Vermonters, as a community? What do we care about? Who do we care about, right? And we preserve the buildings to show that. They're a physical manifestation of those values, right? I think that villages, you know, that expression, it takes a village. There's a reason we have lived in villages and downtowns for thousands of years. It's that social component. And so Paul totally got infill development, right? He totally, I think, well, I won't speak for him, but I can speak for Preservation Trust that we absolutely do believe in that. I think the last thing that we want to see is a Vermont that is for a select few, that is exclusive. We really need to think about preservation holistically. It's absolutely important to save these buildings that define a sense of place, but also to add to them and to have a vibrant ecosystem of throughout the ages of what buildings look like. So there's always going to be change. You know, I was in West Burke yesterday. When I was a kid, there were 4 general stores in West Burke. Now they have 1, right? And the, you know, incredible historic built infrastructure there. You've also got Kingdom Trails on the other side of the hill, bringing in $11 million of economic impact. It hasn't made it to West Burke yet, but a bike shop just opened in West Burke, right? There's changes happening in these rural economies. We need to prepare for them. I think we can maintain our sense of place and our values. They're not mutually exclusive. And so I know there's a lot of conversations about housing and, you know, I think we're really excited to be a part of those conversations and to help, you know, certainly with VHCB, when you look at places like New Avenue, right, or really across the state, these historic buildings that are some of the proudest success stories we have as a state for creating affordable housing. And so, you know, I think it's time to double down on that, and we're excited to do it.
What do you think about renovating a church in the housing?
I think it's, you know, I got to tell you, I think this is important. This is really, really important. And I think, you know, there's some really specific examples of that right now, particularly Winooski. There's a really interesting conversation going on. It is totally possible to adaptively reuse these buildings. And, you know, I know we talk a lot about historic preservation in terms of maintaining character and things like that. That is important. But we also need to talk about climate change, right? The greenest building is the building that is never built, right? When you think about the carbon that was expended to build something like St. Stephen's and Winooski, to throw that away, and for reasons that are not necessary, is really, I think, not a good idea. So there are examples throughout the country of churches that have been adaptively reused for all kinds of things, from a martial arts studio to an arts center to housing. It is possible.
And I'm glad you brought that up, the idea that renovation, while more expensive in historic buildings, and I think of French Block down here on Main Street, but the idea that we don't think about it in that total term of what it would take to rebuild it is less expensive up on a price tag, but again, it's already been built.
Right.
So,
and to be honest, places like that are never going to be built again. You know, when I go to church rarely, but when I do, it's at St. Augustine's. And I spend a lot of time sitting in there thinking about how do we turn this into I won't tell anybody, but yeah.
you just did. So
yeah, well, sorry about that.
Representative LeBounty.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I love driving through the towns and seeing, you know, like the old, you know, places, and I'm really happy that, they're keeping it, because that's part of the town for, 100, 150 years. And, I really love that it's being used in that. We had a train station where I'm from in Barton, and it got torn down in the 70s. And a lot of people were pretty, upset about it, that they didn't use it for something else instead of just tearing it down. But just a little bit of background on the marble industry. I can't remember the date, but it was when Chester Arthur was the president. When they were making the monuments down in Arlington Cemetery, all those marble comes from that plant. And so they signed a contract, and I forgot how many years that they had to do that. And so all that marble down in Arlington Cemetery came from that plant.
Thank you for mentioning that. I should have, that's absolutely true, including the Supreme Court, the Jefferson Memorial, these incredible like monuments to democracy. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was all fabricated at this facility.
And they're steelworker unions.
And just one, did you say you were from Barton?
Pardon?
Did you say you were from Barton?
Yeah, that's brought up in Barton.
I grew up in Sutton, and earlier this week I was at the Pierce Block in downtown Barton with folks from Rural Edge who, with support of the HCB, helped stabilize that building so that there's an opportunity for the future for something great to happen. That is like a signature building. Imagine downtown Barton without the Pierce Block.
Yep.
All right, thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for stopping in.
Yeah, thanks. Wonderful to see you. I appreciate the time.
All right, next up we have Mohammed.
Morning, everyone. My name is
How are you?
I am Community Trust Voice for New Americans. And again, I'm saying thank you for funding this Housing Trust, which is the only option that we have as New Americans. I moved to Vermont on 2010, where I started my life here. And since then, I was helping the community. Last year, we had 15 people evicted by the landlords because it was increasing, but they were living there for like last 10 years, and the money was like so, low. They wanted to evict them in another case so they can rent it to a new renter with the 3,000 something around. And I had 15 eviction letter, which was so hard to place these people. 3 of them were single mom who doesn't speak English, depending on me. And I depend on Champlain Housing Trust to give them these cases if they can save them from homelessness, which they did it. And right now, honestly, I'm telling you in front of you, for New Americans, they don't have any other option than Champlain Housing Trust. That's the only option they have. They have to move it. Or they have to be, all of them are in the waiting list, the rest who didn't get it. Last week, 3 of Somali Bantu community moved while their tears was coming out because they love this state. They love to live here, but now they have no option. There is no housing. They can't wait. Their waiting list is so long that they can't wait. So one of them called me, actually, before I got here, they get a house in Kentucky, which they don't want to leave it, but that's the option, the only option, because a friend is there to help them to find a place to live. So I really come to here to explain to you that this is the only option. 3 of them who was working at the airport, I work for United Airlines too. 3 of them who are working on the ramp are left. And that position, we can't hire anyone right now. We're looking for it, for 3 of them. Now we're short-staffed to get a staff because they couldn't get a house in here. They were on the waiting list. It take a long time. The landlord said, oh, I have to renovate this house. You have to move it out. Look around, call everywhere. I couldn't get it. So they had to move it. They were forced to move. And if that continues, I'm 100%, I'm telling you right now, next 2 years will be a few New Americans going to live around Burlington area because of the housing problem. One thing, landlords, they're not doing accidentally, or they're not doing because they don't like it, because they're large families. And kids, if you live 5 years in one apartment with 7, 8, 9 kids, how it looks like. They put that in the system. Next landlord will say, oh, the other landlord, I call him and you destroy their house. So how will I trust you? Again, the second option is the only option they have is again, Champlain Housing Trust. I'm glad that they're working on it. They build a lot of apartments right now and they're working on it. And I'm just, again, letting you know, if you consider those people to live around Burlington, we need help to get more funds so all these people can live in that place. They are the only person they have me to call in the middle of night in the middle of the night, every time I get a call, nothing else, housing. I presented myself to them because 90% they don't speak English. The whole family doesn't speak English. They get a letter and they don't know what it is. So I have to go there, or they have to send me the picture and read for them and then communicate it. And I'm glad that we have this Champlain Housing Trust. Otherwise, there could be no new Americans will live around here at this time. Some they have a hopes, and one day we will get more housing, affordable housing around Burlington area. And they live in Chittenden County because they don't have help. They don't speak English. If they could have moved the rest of the Vermont, this is where they get help. This is where the few people who speak English live around here. So they have a lot of option to move around Vermont. It's only Chittenden County where they live and move. I moved to Essex last in 2016, and myself affected me. And I get that from landlord sending me because I speak English and I can defend and I can convince him. And I said, I pay the rent, so tell me why I'm moving out. There's no reason that I have to move. And tell me, he didn't have any reason. He said, okay, I will give you more time now. He didn't call me anymore. So if you don't speak English, you get a letter. And how are you going to respond? He's asking you to move it out. So the best family that Housing Trust saved for me was a family lived in Essex around Big Lot. And they were evicted, and there was a letter coming from the landlord's lawyer. And it took us almost 8 months to get them an apartment on Champlain Street in Burlington, where they now peacefully living without stress. He had a blood pressure, the guy, and every time he calls me, he will end up in the hospital because he doesn't speak English. That's very hard when you don't understand the letters. And when somebody's reading for you, it's scary and you can't do it anything. And I'm happy that he lives in Champlain Housing Trust. And I always, looking forward to get more funds so they can build more affordable housing.
Thank you. My forefathers, my family were immigrants in the 19th century from Bavaria. And the stories just sound the same. We weren't called New Americans, or my family wasn't called New Americans, but they came here because of the poverty in their homelands. Can you Burlington, Chittenden County is really a melting pot, and it had just many people who are considered New Americans now. Can you share a little bit of your story about what brought you here? What brought you to Vermont in the first place?
Yes, I was born in Somalia in southern Bat, and after the Civil War broke in, I was a young kid. My dad then said, "Hey, we have to run from here. There's no another life." So we moved to the neighboring country, which is Kenya, and Kenya's kind of separated us, and we moved to a northern eastern part of, which is always there's no rain, and the dust is like a rain. When the dust is coming, the wind is picking up the dust. You can't see anything. Even if you're on the road, the car coming, you can't see. The kind of housing we live in was a tent that we live in there to survive it. And we are not allowed to go into Kenya anyway. They don't give you. We lived there for like 25 years, and we never get any ID to go out of the camp. It's like a jail which you can't get it out. And if you go back to the country, it's another thing that you will not be alive. So living there for 25 years, going to school there, finishing my high school, and UNHCR helped us to get some kind of a crash program that we can at least work in the camps and help the other people. And we didn't have any hope that Somalia will get peaceful and we're gonna go back. Finishing a whole of my life in the camp and no hope of going anywhere. My wife get an opportunity. Her family was being selected to be resettled in U.S. And that's how I get that opportunity, leaving my family back still there in the camps. And I moved to Vermont 2010. And I always say I'm glad in Vermont. I live in Vermont. I have all friends all over the country, and I know what kind of experience they experience it. And right now, living in Essex, my kids go to Essex Elementary, Founders, and Essex Middle School. Actually, my daughter is going to go to high school this year, and they feel like a home. They never feel like they're different from the community they live in, which is Essex is a very amazing community, which I really like always saying I'm glad I'm in Vermont. So that's how I get to Vermont. But now it looks like it's a different of when I came 2010, where my apartment was 2-bedroom and I was paying $700. And now I live in 3-bedroom and I'm paying 2,500. And I kind of know how it is coming in, and I'm 100% sure again, next 2-3 years, if there's no action, you will not see us around here. Everyone is gonna have to move it. If you go to Dr. Pepper, which was like Green Mountain Coffee people, like how many people work there? If you go to Adam Hub, how many people work there? It's almost like a lot of my community work in a warehouse. And that doesn't help to support housing unless they have like Champlain Housing, which helps them with subsides, anyone who comes in. Or again, we have almost 17 people who are bringing their family back here, like a man who left his wife and children bringing, or a wife who left her husband and bringing in. We are trying to get that, but a lot of them are questioning me. It's like, what do you think, Mohammed? It's going to happen next. Everyone is questioning themselves that they don't want to be a homeless. So again, it comes back to the housing problem. And I think one day we will solve this and we will come over.
Well, thank you for having that hope. That's what we're working towards. So Representative Krasno.
Hi, I wasn't here for introductions, but I represent South Burlington, so very close to Burlington, and I'm just so thankful. I hear what you're saying and want to ensure that all folks that you mentioned are able to stay here and be a part of our community and feel welcome and heard. And I'm just so grateful for your work, and I wanted to give you this. And please reach out. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.
And thank you for the work that you're doing with your community, helping people try to stay in their housing, and for working with Champlain Housing Trust to try to keep your community together.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, Matt Williams, Catamount Trail Association. Our conservation representative.
Yes. I have a few. Let's see.
Is that a co-host or?
Share your,
Yeah.
yeah.
So can I just share it?
Yep,
right
or
from?
if you're in there, oops, sorry, you want to go back to business? And
There we
share.
go. Okay. Got it.
And then start.
Share a few photos with you all. Yeah, my name is Matt Williams. I'm the executive director of the Catamount Trail Association. We're a backcountry skiing, winter outdoor recreation focused nonprofit. Been around for 35 years or so, and had been a part of working with VHCB for about 20, I think. Hopefully I have that right. We work across the state. The Catamount Trail is sort of the winter version of the Long Trail, so to speak. It runs from Massachusetts to Canada. We also work with community groups around the state to develop recreational resources in their towns. The Ridgeline group in Rochester is sort of a highlight of that work for us. We work to conserve those trails and recreational resources for the long term, and to run programs to expand access to them I know the importance of connection to the landscape and the role that recreation has played in my life, and certainly for many of us in the organization, that's been true. And so we really feel like it's important to do what we can to make sure that experience is shared as broadly as possible. I think it's, outdoor recreation is fun, but I think especially the last few years, it's been driven home to me just the importance of joy in people's lives and the importance of connection to our landscape and the role that plays in our lives, and mental health and physical health and connection to each other and community. And so, I think I'm grateful that VHCB recognizes that it's about, certainly we're not a first order problem like housing, but that it's important to sort of support outdoor recreation for those benefits that it brings to the state. So I'll just share, this is a photo of a conservation easement in Morrisville that we just got last year with VHCB's support of 1.5 miles of trail that we were able to put a trail easement on and permanently protect in an area outside Stowe that certainly worried about development and future access. But what I really want to talk to you all about today are some programs that VHCB has supported through their AmeriCorps program for 10 years now, youth programs around the state. Again, this is sort of a big part of our effort to expand access to the outdoors and give people who wouldn't otherwise have a chance to get out and ski a chance to do it. We know there are a lot of benefits to it. We also know there are a lot of barriers. Sometimes they're financial, sometimes sort of lack of familiarity or having a community around it. I think one of the big things for us is that we feel like proximity doesn't necessarily equal access. It's great to have conserved spaces outside your door. That's a great first step, but often it takes a little bit more support than that for people to actually get out and use them. And so that's where our youth programs play a big role. VHCB's support and the AmeriCorps program has been foundational to these programs. They've supported them more or less from the beginning. They've grown now. We work in 7 counties around the state. Work with over 30 school and community partners to get kids outside. And we'll get about 1,300 kids out skiing this year, most of whom have never skied before they join and get out with CTA programs. One I want to highlight is a program that we run on Saturdays called Ski Cubs. We run it at the Catamount Community Forest in Williston, which was a VHCB project a number of years ago. The program mostly works with students from the Burlington and Winooski area. Many of them are new Americans. We used to run this program at a private ski area, and their understandable need to make money has sort of pushed us out over the years. The field where we used to ski and teach kids to ski is now a swimming pool. The indoor space that we used to use is now an indoor skate park. And Catamount was really a lifeline for us and for this program. I think it's a wonderful illustration of the way that investments in open space and in land near communities that VHCB makes certainly have an immediate impact, but they have a long-term impact over the generations. And this is not a program that was part of the mix or part of the case when the Catamount Community Forest project happened, but it's when we approached them this winter saying, hey, we really need a space, it's right in line with their mission. The trails are there, the infrastructure is there, and they welcomed us in, and we get between 40 and 50 kids a Saturday out from the Burlington and Winooski area. We provide transportation, skis, instructors, snacks, warm clothes if they need them. We run 6 sessions a winter, and our goal across these programs, which look a little different depending on the community, is really long-term engagement with students, 5-6 sessions a winter over the course of multiple years so that they can really build skills, build community around it. And we just hear over and over the ways in which, it's just a different different way for students to interact with each other, with their peers, see themselves in a new light. Students who don't do particularly well in the classroom, but they are great on skis, and their peers are able to see them excelling in that way, and they see themselves excelling, and that confidence translates into the classroom. It's a hard challenge, but they see their friends doing it. We had a girl in the Sea Cubs program who was like falling down everywhere the first weekend, but she saw her friend could make it a little bit further than her, and she told one of the volunteers that got me back the next week, and now she's making it that little bit farther every week. And I was out a couple weeks ago, and I overheard a kid talking and said, I can't believe winters can be so warm. And to me, that's just great. It's it's sort of, we want them to improve on skis. We want them to learn the sport, of course, but it's really about, familiarity with the winter landscape, connection to the natural world around them, and just comfort in outdoors in winter. And especially if you come from a place, whether it's internationally or just, from Alabama or Texas or somewhere where there's no snow, it's kind of, certainly can be intimidating. And so just feeling comfortable and having fun with your friends is really important. It's tremendously rewarding program for us to be able to run. Again, would not be possible without VHCB. And, I think it's, we're just really grateful to be able to sort of do our little part to hopefully, help enrich people's lives and give them access to a landscape that, I think certainly for me has provided a lot of meaning over the course of my life. And I think for many people in Vermont, it's sort of why we live, big part of why we live here. And so I'm grateful to VHCB's support, both for conserving the lands that make that possible in the first place, and for, the support through the AmeriCorps program and others to then really proactively provide the opportunity for people to use it who might otherwise not. So whether it's in Burlington, Winooski, or in rural communities, a lot of our work is focused on underserved low-income rural communities around the state. I grew up in one of those, and it's similar issues. It's land everywhere. My parents were really into hiking and skiing and biking, and so I did those things. But I had friends who didn't, and there just weren't those opportunities. And so it's I think a small but hopefully impactful role that we can play, and grateful to VHCB's support in that. And thank you all for your work to support the housing and conservation efforts.
Questions for Matt?
I just want to share that my uncle, Michael, has, I think it's been 25 years, has run a ski program for Charlotte Central School. And so I've seen just the impact that it's had for the community I grew up in, and folks who didn't have the means to go to the mountain and help get equipment for all kids to have access. I grew up skateboarding, so everyone could just kind of pick up a skateboard, but it's often very expensive to get all the equipment. And so I've really seen the impact that he's had on thousands of lives, and they're so grateful. So I'm really excited that this program is doing similar things. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative LeBoun.
Thank you. I drive school bus in the mornings before I come here. And but on Mondays, we're not in session. And so between my morning and afternoon run, I pick up kids, and they have 4 different schools, and I bring them up to Burke Mountain. And so we do that. It's 6 weeks for 6 weeks. And it's great when the kids get on the bus from Lunenburg and the other one is from Burke, and they go, "Hey, Samantha, come over here," so they build that relationship amongst the schools, and like these, and like Representative Cosmo said, is that, some of these families couldn't afford to be able to bring their kids to the mountain because it's expensive and getting the equipment and everything, but everything's all, paid for, and, they get their snacks, and you can see when they get on the bus, the smiles, on their faces. They had a great time, and they get outdoors, and they get to experience, what skiing is, and be able to make friends across communities. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Just a quick primer, if you will, on, so we're asked, the witnesses have been asking for the full statutory give for VHCB, and I just want to repeat that again. I think we've talked about it. Certainly the issues, the differences, we've talked so much about housing in this committee as opposed to conservation, but I think Gus Selig's slideshow earlier in the year is a reference point to see what we're talking about. We're talking about recreation, we're talking about farms, we're talking about I just want to spend a couple of minutes while we're on live just to go over, this property transfer tax. What we're talking about was put into place about 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And the reason was because at the time, real estate prices were getting out of control for ordinary Vermonters, and land prices were getting out of control. And so the pressures to sell or develop land that would then become housing communities, sprawl for some. If it sounds familiar, it's what's obviously happening now. And the goal, the way it is now, is that there's an average of about a 1.5% tax. It's called the property transfer tax, and there's nuances within that. It's $100,000. The first $100,000 of a house isn't taxed, but everything after that is taxed at a different level. And so it comes out to about 1.5% overall. So to see all the real estate transactions happening in the last several years at levels that we haven't seen ever before, we're seeing an increase in the property transfer tax. No matter how it's being used and what we've heard, the statutory language is out of the hunt. So let's just say there's $40 million in property transfer tax. 2% is taken off the top for business reasons, for maintenance of the fund and whatnot. So then you have 98%. Of that, 50% is supposed to go by statute to the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund. So if it was $40 million, you take 2% off. So you end up with what? What's that?
39.2.
So you have 39.2, yeah, so it's not an easy number, but you have 39.2. Cut that in half, and it's supposed to go to the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund. From that Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, 60% is spent on housing. So when we keep talking about the 9% deals and the money that's going into housing to build, to seed projects or be first in, last in money, 40% then goes to conservation. They have a different matching mechanism with federal funding. So projects that affect Matt and the Catamount Trails would come from that money. So that's where the 50% of the property transfer tax is going as far as our work is concerned. The other 50% by statute, 17% is supposed to go to municipal planning, treasurer, other stuff that we're talking about now, and that's been traditionally underfunded. And then 33% was supposed to go to the general fund. And that 33% has grown over the years because we have a thing in our statute that says notwithstanding. So notwithstanding what the statute says, we've been making decisions about how we use that money. Pandemic has changed things a little bit for the last couple of years. That money's running out. We're heading back to this world of what is in the property transfer tax and how it's going to be used. And so, and then there's political decisions that go along with that. But that's just I think that's the shortest in all the years that I've been here that I've been able to describe what the property transfer tax is. So we'll understand that context more as we talk about housing. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you all for having me.
Really appreciate and being able to celebrate the VHCB and the VHCC. Thank you for your work on the state to provide not only affordable housing, but on the conservation to make it worth living here, more than worth living.
Thank you very much.
right, committee, we are done for the morning. We will come back at 1:15 for some bill introductions and a bill walkthrough. So the first will be some housing, some small things, short forms. Most of the stuff that I'm on the list for are things that we may consider for a committee bill. But I'll just introduce what they are. Some of them are, two of the bills I'm introducing are bills that have been around for a little while, and then we'll hear at 2:30. We'll hear about H111, which is the workforce housing bill. That'll be a walkthrough. So take some extra time for lunch. Thank you again for a long day yesterday. The housing. Does anybody have any quick feedback on what they heard last night?
I think it was pretty uniform. Uniform message was, we need housing. And people of different venues and different parts of the spectrum were all crying the same thing. And, you know, some of the testimonies are pretty moving.
I would just say that, yeah, I agree. And we certainly do need the housing. The thing I don't want to overlook is the last story of the evening about people in that housing. And I'm sending an email right at the moment for a very similar reason. Just, you know, those buildings are supposed to be helpful, and when it turns negative for people living there, it's just like anything else. And it's nothing unique about living, but when there's bad actors, then there has to be ways to move them along. I'm sure there's somebody who would love to have that apartment who wouldn't be doing that. So,
and we just had a demonstration here from Mohammed. The biggest issue with housing with them is not the housing, it's the language. We should have English language teaching, providing for, I don't care whether it's Somalis or Kenyans or wherever they come from. If they can't speak the language, they start off at an extreme disadvantage. So does that come from human services? Or does it come from educational programs? Get it together. I mean, these are small communities now, but they're going to grow. And there's already troubles in Maine from Somali communities. And it's because of the language barrier. People don't understand their culture.
Well, this country was, at least the 19th century on,
That's right.
was built on very similar things. Yeah. No, I thought what was nice, one of the things that was nice about last night is that we had a landlord, you know, and a smaller landlord, not a large corporation. They're just, you know, I mean, I think he said there are no saints in housing, and it's like how, you know, the work that we do to work with BHCB to provide low affordable housing, but also trying to provide tools so that people can develop housing. But also, you know, it's a very difficult business anyway, and I'm glad he had the courage to come up and, you know, remind us that it's many facets to the conversation, and we can't demonize landlords, we can't demonize tenants. There's always, you know, we have to take all that into account and understand that there is stressors involved, but I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gentleman from Stowe who spoke about short-term rentals at the end raised some interesting points. And also, as we've heard from JFO, the state doesn't have a good way to separate in our data between something that might be a short-term rental and something that's a vacation home or a second home is not lived in. And I think we need to be able to tell them apart. And I think that policy that helps us tell them apart will be important, because while I embrace some of the things about remote working trends that have come out since the pandemic, and I think it can help some of our climate issues and some of our emissions issues, there are some knock-on effects in our capitalist society that mean that there are business opportunities that weren't necessarily there before. Also, short-term rentals, aside from remote working, is also it started as a market disruption a decade ago and has significantly disrupted the market. And yet, as a state, we don't have the way to parse. Really, we just know, is it a homestead or is it not a homestead? And that's insufficient. So I hope that we can think about that as a legislature moving forward, because regardless of what policy changes we might want to make, we need better data in terms of where these places are. And I understand that the registry from last year might have spoken to some of that, but I think even at a more basic level, some reporting would be beneficial to have another category. That at least even our folks at JFO would be able to crunch some numbers, which currently they're unable to do.
I agree.
Agreed. All right.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, thank you. Let's go have lunch.